Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Medtech, the premier podcast for the medical device and diagnostic industry. On this episode, we're talking to none other than Logan McKnight, founder of GoodKnight Consulting. Logan helps founders of medtech companies strengthen their teams and grow their companies. Logan is a former medtech CEO who spent nearly 2 decades moving from the operating room to the executive seat. She talks about her experiences and trends in medtech on this powerful episode. So, without further ado, let's talk medtech with Logan McKnight. Well, hello and welcome to Let's Talk MedTech. I have with me here today Logan McKnight, founder and CEO of GoodKnight Consulting. Logan has worn many hats in healthcare and medtech, and we'll jump into those. But first, Logan, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Omar. I'm glad to be here.
I knew I found a kindred spirit when I heard your talk at South, and you were mentioning listening to Skrilla and Wu-Tang in the operating room, and I was like, yes, I've got to have her on Let's Talk MedTech.
I know, I think it spoke to a very small subset of the people that were there, born in the 80s, right?
Yes, yes. Now, I want to talk all about GoodKnight Consulting and some of the trends you've seen in healthcare and medtech over the years. But first, I want to talk a little bit about your journey into healthcare, into medtech.
Mm.
How did you first enter into this amazing industry of innovation and regulation?
Yeah, so I'd love to say that some people I've met that their families are in healthcare and med tech and its legacy. My story is not that. I was very haphazard. I was pre-med, and right before I went to apply for medical school, I kind of panicked because I realized I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to more school. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I was interning with a veterinarian who basically told me, don't do it. Go to med school and get some animals if you love it. And I really wasn't sure what to do. So I joined a company that did neuromonitoring, which was a clinical services company monitoring patients' brain and spinal cords during surgery, straight out of my bachelor's degree. And so that
Wow,
was kind of how I found my way into med tech, and then got into neurosurgery and neurodevice and spinal devices along the way. But I've been in the clinical services space and then in med device for almost 20 years now.
amazing,
Hmm.
amazing, amazing. I'm sure you've seen a lot of things in that time, in that 20-year span. What was kind of the cool or what was kind of the emerging technology when you first started? Do you remember? For me, when I started MedTech, when I started covering it, it was drug-eluting stents. That was kind of
Mm.
that was the hot technology that everybody was talking about.
Yeah, I think so because I was on the spine side, I think the imaging, the intraop imaging and what they were able to do then with that image and planning in the OR,
Sure.
especially for big deformity cases.
Mhm.
When I started, I mean they were still piecing together x-rays. They were waking up
Wow.
patients in the middle of procedures to make sure they could move their feet and legs. So it's just come such a long way in the 20 years since I've been doing it. But I think that was I remember when the ORM came in. I mean, it was literally like the elephant in the room because this thing is gigantic.
Mm.
But to be able to see images like that intraoperatively instead of afterwards and finding things out was just so cool. What you could do in the OR. I thought that was one of the coolest parts of the job.
Awesome, awesome. Well, now let's get into Goodnight Consulting. Oh, you obviously had a great career in healthcare and medtech, but what led you to start the company and what services do you provide for your clients?
Yeah, so I was the CEO of my company, and at the end of 2023, I decided to kind of step down. I was wearing a lot of different hats in that we were running a small service company. I was also running a medical billing company and a company in India and running a medical device distributorship. So, I'll be honest, COVID kind of kicked my butt. It was
Yeah,
really tough. Working in elective surgery and spine and neurosurgery. I mean, we had a lot of cases cancel, a lot of people figuring out what are we going to do? And I mean, not just for a week, like 6 weeks, because I live up in
sure,
Seattle,
sure.
Washington. So what I really kind of was always interested in too was the people aspect because I really
Mhm.
felt like I worked with so many brilliant people and it, it really depended like how, the team interacted together that if they were successful or not. What I found was like even when I would go into sales and product development, and no matter where I was, if you didn't have somebody giving like clear direction and the team buying into it, it didn't matter how brilliant and experienced and talented everybody, it just kind of felt like nothing was going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I was mostly involved in like post-commercial companies, so sales and getting things out in the field and in the hands of surgeons and doctors. And I noticed that there was just always a big disconnect between corporate and what was going on out in the field. And so I was really passionate about helping large, but mostly small, medium-sized companies scale their leadership team and integrating like a really strong sales team to kind of get their device in the hands of doctors and make sure that they've got a unified culture. That was always something that was just really interesting to me, is just kind of the disconnect between teams across regions. And, if you lose a good salesperson, you're losing relationships, you're
Mhm.
losing a lot of things, and they can just switch and get another device in that doctor's hands within a week. So
Right.
that was just always very interesting to me.
Why do you think there is such a disconnect, or there was such a disconnect, in the field and corporate? And I don't mean with specific companies, but just in
Yeah.
general, just in general.
No,
Yeah.
in general, I mean, I think honestly, there's this idea of, well, they don't know what we deal with.
Mhm.
And so I think people in the field are like, okay, this is great, but it doesn't translate to what's actually going on. A lot to like clinical education and all those things were great at corporate, but they're like, that's not really what's going to happen in the OR. That's really not what, it's going to take to implement this. And for me, I'm like, why not have those tough conversations instead of kind of, I don't want to say pitting against each other, but not listening to the experience that one
Mhm.
division's having, and then out in the field kind of going your own direction. Just things break down. And so
Mhm.
having the conversation, I think, is really important. And then also, I think bringing in the opinions of people that are out in the field and talking to people in corporate, giving them feedback about what's working with surgeons, what isn't. That's really, really important, I think, for a device and a company to stay healthy and profitable, is make sure that what they're actually, putting out in the field is useful in the ways they're intending.
Yeah, speaking to that disconnect, I had a relative that worked in a call center, and she would, she would take all the customer complaints and all the customer suggestions, but marketing would come up with these interesting products, but marketing never really tested those products. And the call center was like the first line of defense. I'm not gonna say line of defense, that's a bad term, but they were the first people to kind of experience the customer feedback. And you
Hmm.
had a situation where you had, marketing didn't understand how to they didn't understand the products that they were kind of marketing for or pushing, because they didn't have hands-on experience, or they didn't really talk to the customers. So I get that disconnect, and it definitely, I see it play out in healthcare as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think the other part that I've noticed, and I was just talking to somebody about this recently, is, the sectors get a little divided and siloed. Like, when once you get in like the cardiac space, that's kind of where you stay. When you're in
Mhm.
spine, you stay there, and neuro. And I think, that's kind of a disservice, because I think when you start crossing over and sharing insights and a little bit of diverse experience, that's when you can really make some cool advancements within a company. And I still see that, especially in like marketing and sales and innovation, like there's still that rigidity with the big companies of like, oh, you don't cross, it's like Ghostbusters, you don't cross streams.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Unless you want to send, what is it, Zed or whatever his name is, Gozar the Gazarian, back to the Nether Realm or wherever he was from. Yes, that's the only time you can cross the stream. Yeah. Oh gosh, yes, yes. I want to ask now. I want to talk a little bit about your clients, and I don't want to get into specifics like who you're serving, but
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about the common issues that they face, and kind of find out a time when is the perfect time for them to kind of engage your services, and are there times that are too late?
Well, first, I don't know if it's really ever too late, but there are times where it's messier, right? Like it's
Messier,
like,
yeah.
and I agree. I think the challenging thing is sometimes it's before you really recognize you need to bring somebody in. It's kind of when you start to feel that plateau. But to me, it's when they've been plateauing for too long and then they start backsliding. They start losing revenue, start losing clients, and then they eventually start losing team members. And, that's out of frustration that there's no upward mobility, maybe a lack of transparency and
Sure.
communication. And so that's normally when I get brought in is when, either by private equity VC or the founder themselves, that they're just not sure how to scale their team and get them unified behind like a vision and what they really want. And they know they need to bring on the right people to make it happen. But honestly, sometimes the founders just really struggle with giving up control. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's just human nature. A lot of times it's their baby, right? Like they don't want to give up control, but you have to bring it in and to your point, sometimes you don't know what the market wants. Like you can have blinders on when it comes to your baby, right? No one
Sure.
wants to hear they've got an ugly baby. And sometimes you got to make tweaks and compromises when it comes to not only the product but like the vision for scaling your organization and work with people and actually look at the reality of it, like of what the situation is, what you need to bring in versus your perfect plan, right? If you've got a med device, I mean, the reality is before you're profitable and in the hand of getting in the hands of like the big strategics, sometimes it's 5 to 7 years.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you got to play the long game and
Hmm.
make it
Hmm.
last. And so I think that's been the most interesting challenge is working with like the small startup companies as they're going through rounds of funding and trying to stay alive to get to that point, and get the relationship with the strategic so they can either get bought out or be sustainable on their own when they go to commercial.
Have you ever had to deal with any nightmare scenarios or really, really messy scenarios?
I think that and not to call anybody out. I mean, this is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
the situation I think of coming in where a leadership team has gotten very, very toxic. Um, that's really, really challenging because that means that, like for me, I feel like I'm having to be a strategist and a therapist and
There you
do a
go.
little relationship counseling to actually
Mhm.
figure out like is this salvageable or do we need to part ways and figure out how to do this because a lot of times I think up executive leadership thinks well this we're hiding our dysfunction super well, like our team doesn't know, and I'm like your team knows. Like
Yeah,
they know,
yeah,
they
yes.
feel it. And so I'd say those are kind of the moments where I'm like, this is going to be like before we can even get to the real work, we have to get through this kind of like messy ego people stage. That and then sometimes I get brought in by VC and private equity, and the founder's not exactly on board. And for me, it's really, really important that they trust me. They understand I'm there to help them. And so that's like always a little hurdle to get over too, if they're not involved with bringing someone like me in.
Sure. Now, I know throughout your career and throughout the things that you've done with GoodKnight Consulting that you've come across a lot of trends in the medical device industry. Um, can you think back to some of those things when you were first starting to begin your career? Like, what were some of the trends, and how has the technology changed in medtech since you began your career? Of course, the easy answer is AI, right? We've got
Yeah.
artificial intelligence now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is the hot thing to talk about, but I still don't think we've fully figured out how to integrate it and
No.
and do it well. And so, while of course everyone's talking about it, it's really the question of like, well, how do we utilize it? And I think the issue I've seen with that, and not to digress from like the trends too much, but is
Sure, sure.
honestly, it's who owns the information when it comes to AI.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if you have a device in a hospital and it's getting information from the patient, but maybe it needs to go back to corporate to actually have the LLM or large language model like dissect it and do something with it. What I've been seeing is hospitals saying, well, sorry, that's our information. That's,
Mm.
and so there's now this kind of war of information and that being seen as like a way to monetize and like who owns that. And I'm like, but the patient doesn't own it. It's not theirs. It's either the hospitals or it's the device company that's getting it. And I think that's going to be an interesting hurdle before even figuring out how to properly implement it is like, how do you even get it to the company to do something with because that seems to be a bit of a breakdown but yeah and I think like what I've noticed too is a little bit more as healthcare has changed since I've
Mhm.
started. I mean, in the last 20 years, like no one can deny it's been a dramatic change of like what companies were getting reimbursed on, what
Yeah.
hospitals were getting reimbursed on, and like as the pie has gotten smaller and smaller, I think physicians and companies have had to be smarter about doing more with less. And that's always really challenging, to kind of do, but still deliver the type of care. So I think they're trying to do a lot more with like initial testing and diagnostics before they run in and do a big procedure, and then go find out it's not going to reimburse. So I think there's going to be a wave of diagnostics, and right now it's challenging to get reimbursed for that. But my hope is that they see that will eliminate more cost down the line. But those are always, I think, the big disconnects with like, what do physicians need? What's industry producing? And then what's, insurance going to reimburse over here, right?
Oh, that is one of the major issues that we've seen at MDDI, especially with companies coming from the tech side or entrepreneurs coming from the tech side that are coming into healthcare that have this wonderful innovation, this wonderful
Hmm.
device. They say, oh, we need FDA clearance. They don't know a 510K from a PMA, but hey, what have you. But they talk about getting regulatory approvals, but they don't talk about reimbursement. They don't talk about who's going to pay for this thing if they can get it on the market. And that is one of the things that I always preach on this episode. I say you need a regulatory plan that
Hmm.
includes reimbursement, and you need to know your market. It's good to get approval and it's good to get clearance, but who's going to pay for this thing? Because ultimately, yes, you want to help patients, but you also run a business in a sense too. Well, not in a sense, but you run a business.
Right.
So you do need to get paid for this. And a lot of innovators that we talk to coming from the tech side, they just think that the greatest hurdle is FDA, and it's clearly
It's
not.
just it's
It's
just one of the many,
yes,
right?
yes, yes, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
no, it's a marathon for sure. I mean, and I think that's, getting through those initial hurdles, and then even if you get, the ability, like a CPT code, the ability to get reimbursed and all that stuff. I mean, then your next step is even like, is there market share for it? Is that market share viable? Is it going to be utilized? Like, have you
Mhm.
even talked to doctors and nurses, which I think is, a lot of these products are meant to be used by, non-physicians and ancillary staff for patients. And a lot of companies come in and they haven't even talked in like to the nurses to see, is this something that'll be useful? So I think these are all hurdles as you go down. And I think that's why consulting has become such a big thing
Mhm.
for the
Mhm.
medtech startup space, is because you need a different type of expertise at each level.
Mhm.
And sometimes you don't need that, regulatory FDA person for the long haul.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm sorry to any regulatory and FDA people that are like, yes, you do.
Yes.
But you need maybe more expertise at certain points. And I think that's why it's nice to have people offering services like these that they can kind of plug and play depending on where you are in your journey.
Yes, I think so too. You need an ear, you need a seasoned veteran, and you need someone who can be impartial. And I
Hmm.
think that's where GoodKnight Consulting comes in. And I got to ask you first, the name. Tell me about the origin of the name. I'm sure it probably says exactly what it means. You're probably just on the nose with it. But tell me about the name. How did that come about? Yeah.
So when I was first kind of playing with it, I didn't want it to just be my last name, which is McKnight, McKnight Consulting. And there's been this like phrase that I'm a bit of a believer, actually a big believer in karma. And so I've always kind of said like, you put good into the world, you get good back. And so it's really as simple as that. And then I've always been into chess and strategy. And so the play on like my name with the knight. And so
Mhm.
GoodKnight Consulting, and then my logo's a chess piece, the knight. And so those two pieces I felt like were really,
Sense.
yeah, like who I was. And honestly, I didn't even think it was going to be my full job. I was investing in something else and doing some part-time fractional work. And then it's kind of just grown from there because I really enjoyed the diversity of the clients I work with. And, every project is a little different. And the challenges and the people, it's just been really fun. Like, and I've always enjoyed my job, but I have to admit, this has been the most fun I've had in my field in the last year because it's just been before doing a little bit of fractional work and really in with one organization for a long time. And now to be able to work with multiple organizations and help them through things has just been, and being able to meet so many great people and go to conferences and speak, like all these things that I haven't challenged myself to do before have been an opportunity to just open my eyes, learn a lot of new things, and meet some great people.
With that being said, what has been your biggest accomplishment in your career at Goodnight Consulting or just your career in general?
I feel like every stage had it. I think like, I'll be very honest, when you're in your, corporate career and
Mm,
climbing the ladder, it's like, when I became a manager and then a director and then a VP and then CEO, and I was like hanging on the top and I'm like, okay, so what now?
yes, yes.
And I think going out on your own challenges you in ways that I didn't even know until I went out. The all the things that I was going to have to do and put myself out there. And so I think that's one of the things that I've become proud of, and is that just like having to develop going out and talking about myself and what I offer and meeting people and not being afraid to, I don't know, make a mistake, and recognizing like how quickly I would learn. Because I think that's like we get very trapped by our own success. And like,
Mhm.
you get in this pathway and you're the expert, and then you don't want to do anything new because you don't want to be bad at something. And you don't want to make, and it's like, well, you're gonna have to try new things and you're gonna have to go do this. And so I think just opening up that you can have a lot more possibility and opportunity if you get out of that mindset that you need to just be this successful person and stay in this one bubble in this one lane, because you have a lot of expertise that you can offer different people in different places. You just have to figure out how to go out there and do it.
Oh, wow. What would you tell any professional just getting out of school or just starting in their career? Um, I think you almost just answered that question with the last question that I asked. But what would you tell them? What would you say? Fresh out of school, not knowing, just as green as you know what, you know.
Yeah. So I kind of thought about this a little bit, and I think it's a double-edged sword. But one part of me is like, well, you're young, try a bunch of different things to see what you like. Go
Mm,
and try your hat at this and try it. But at some point, you do have to specialize. You do have to find what your gift is. So I think that would be my advice: is find the unique thing that is like your unique value proposition, your unique value that you enjoy doing. You
mhm,
can, make good money doing it
mhm,
and figure out what that is and like really double down on it, because that uniqueness that you possess, like don't try to be like everybody else and don't do a pathway that you feel like isn't for you, but it's just kind of expected of you. Find that unique thing that you enjoy doing, and you might not know when you graduate. I mean, I didn't even know the field I was entering into until I heard someone talk about it. And then, the next opportunity I had until I got into med tech and med device and started talking to people. So you won't have it figured out in your 20s. Recognize it's cool and it's okay. And, this is such a great opportunity to learn things and just never stop being curious. Like, ask questions, learn about people and what they're doing. I think I'm always fascinated to learn about what people do and how they're making money and how they built their career. And I love a good origin story. So, just go out there and be curious.
Awesome, awesome. Logan, thank you for coming on to Let's Talk MedTech.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
That's it for this episode of Let's Talk MedTech. Thanks again to our guest, Logan McKnight, founder of GoodKnight Consulting. You can find out more about GoodKnight Consulting at goodknightconsulting.net. And Knight is spelled Knight. And please visit us at mddionline.com for all of your MedTech news. Finally, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Let's Talk MedTech on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast.